Have you ever just tried to sit and read a book? Or maybe even just stare out the window for 10 minutes, only to find your hand unconsciously reaching into your pocket,
Oh, yeah.
right? You reach for your dark screen before you even realize what you're doing.
That's like a reflex.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like you haven't made a conscious decision to check your phone. Your brain didn't formulate the thought, I should look at my messages.
No, not at
It's,
all.
it's just a phantom limb reflex. Your
Yeah.
hand is just moving on its own. You're holding the glass rectangle. Your thumb is already swiping. And suddenly you're wondering how you even got there.
It is a universally recognizable moment, and I think it usually comes with this massive wave of guilt, you know?
Oh, totally.
We tell ourselves that we have absolutely no self-control or that our personal discipline is just slipping. But if you look at the actual data surrounding our collective ability to focus, we are operating in a reality that is far more alarming than just, a simple lack of willpower.
Right.
Right now, the reported average limit for sustained attention on a single screen is just 47 seconds.
Ooh, wait, really? 47 seconds?
47 seconds, yeah. Before your morning latte even gets cold, your brain has likely switched tasks 3, 4, maybe even 5 times.
That's terrifying. Because we like to think that we're in control of our own minds, right?
Yeah, we
We
do.
like to believe that our attention is ours to give. But behind that screen in your pocket, there is a multi-billion-dollar supercomputer running this continuous fatigue test on your prefrontal cortex.
Exactly.
So today, we're tracking down the architects of this attention economy. We're doing a deep dive into the mechanics of our vanishing focus.
And we have some incredible material for this.
We do. We're pulling from Johann Hari's really provocative investigation, Stolen Focus, and we're matching that against the hard cognitive psychology of researchers like Onufrieva and Gorbanova.
Great, the SAT research.
Yes, and then throwing in the sharp medical realities brought forward by critics like Rosie Sexton. Because the mission here, the thesis we have to start with, which is the foundational premise of Hari's work, is that your attention hasn't just naturally declined.
No, it hasn't.
It has been deliberately, systematically stolen. Okay, let's unpack this. Because the word stolen is pretty aggressive, right?
It is, yeah. Stolen is a highly cinematic word, but it is it's surgically precise in this context.
Hope so.
Because it implies premeditation. It implies a perpetrator who actively understands the value of the asset they are taking from you. Your focus didn't just wander off into the woods, it was hijacked.
It was transported.
Right. If we look at the mechanics of Silicon Valley, they are utilizing hundreds of billions of A/B tests with one singular ruthless goal, which is figuring out how to keep you scrolling for just 0.1 seconds longer.
And a tenth of a second sounds like a rounding error. Like, who cares about a tenth of a second?
Exactly. It sounds like nothing.
But when you multiply that fraction of a second by 3 billion users, and then multiply that by dozens of sessions a day, you are suddenly looking at billions of dollars in ad revenue.
Billions.
But how are they actually extracting that time? Because we aren't just talking about making an app look pretty, right? We are talking about the literal weaponization of behavioral psychology.
Oh, absolutely. We're talking about the digital evolution of B.F. Skinner's operant conditioning chamber.
Right, the pigeons.
The pigeons. If we go back to the 1950s, Skinner famously experimented with variable ratio schedules using pigeons. He found that if you give a pigeon a food pellet every single time it pecks a button, it pecks only when it's hungry.
Because it's predictable.
Exactly. But if you make the reward unpredictable, if the pigeon doesn't know whether the peck will yield food or yield nothing, the pigeon will become obsessed.
Wow.
It will peck the button frantically, just continuously chasing that uncertainty.
So it's basically a digital casino in our pockets.
That's exactly what it is.
Because you wouldn't sit at a physical slot machine if you had to, like, put in a new coin, pull a heavy mechanical lever, and then wait 10 minutes between every spin. The friction would completely break the trance.
Yeah, you'd get bored and walk away.
Right. But the frictionless design of the infinite scroll is what enables the addiction. The algorithm leverages that exact variable ratio schedule you just mentioned. Every time you pull down to refresh your feed, you are pulling the lever on a slot machine. You might get a super boring update from a distant relative, or you might get a highly stimulating, enraging piece of political news, or, a massive hit of social validation via a notification.
And that uncertainty is what spikes your dopamine. The brain releases dopamine not just when you receive a reward, but And this is key in the anticipation of the reward.
The anticipation, wow.
Right. Tristan Harris, who is a former design ethicist at Google, he describes this entire interface as a fatigue test on human vulnerability.
A fatigue test?
Yeah. The algorithm on the other side of your screen is actively searching for your specific psychological weak points. It isn't just A/B testing two different shades of blue to see which looks nicer.
Right.
It is utilizing these multi-armed banded algorithms to test which specific type of outrage-inducing headline or which autoplaying video optimally spikes your cortisol or your dopamine to keep you locked in.
Because it knows that eventually your prefrontal cortex, which is the part of your brain responsible for executive function and impulse control, is going to get exhausted.
It has to. It's biological.
You, with your sleep-deprived, biologically limited human brain, are going to war against a supercomputer in a cooled server farm that has been optimized by thousands of the smartest behavioral engineers on the planet.
Yeah, good luck with that.
Right. And its only job is to defeat your defense system. I think the analogy from the sources here is perfect. Here's where it gets really interesting. Our so-called free will, trying to fight these algorithms, is like a 2G cellular signal trying to fight off an 8K digital invasion.
That mismatch in processing power is just staggering because the algorithm never needs to sleep. It doesn't experience emotional fatigue. It just endlessly runs the math.
Just crunches the numbers.
Yeah. Furthermore, the infinite scroll was specifically designed to bypass the brain's natural stopping cues.
Stopping cues.
Yeah. So throughout our evolutionary history, almost every human activity had a natural endpoint. You read a chapter of a book, you reach the bottom of the page, and you have to physically turn it.
Right.
That friction is a stopping cue. You finish a meal, the plate is empty, the newspaper has a back page.
But the feed has no bottom. It deliberately removes the stopping cue, which turns our own evolutionary desire for novelty against us.
Exactly.
Like in a prehistoric environment, noticing a new rustle in the bushes kept you alive. Your brain is hardwired to prioritize new, unpredictable information.
It's survival.
Yeah. But today, that exact same survival mechanism is being exploited by a bottomless pit of content.
So I really want you, the listener, to consider your own infinite scroll moments. Think about the last time you lost an hour on a platform.
It happens so fast.
It does. And how much of that time did you feel you were consciously, actively choosing to view that specific content versus feeling like you were just being dragged along by the algorithm's momentum?
Yeah.
It's like being caught in a riptide. You want swimming, you're being pulled out to sea.
And when you're caught in a riptide, the absolute worst thing you can do is exhaust yourself trying to swim directly against it with brute strength.
Right, you'll drown.
Which introduces this massive contradiction in our culture.
Yeah.
If we are vastly outmatched by these 8K algorithmic invasions, why is the dominant cultural narrative still focused on telling us to just try harder to focus?
Oh, the self-help industry.
Yes. We see it in every productivity blog and self-help book. Just practice mindfulness, use the Pomodoro technique, put your phone in a drawer.
This brings us to Hari's most devastating critique of the self-improvement industry, which he calls the trap of cruel optimism.
Cruel optimism.
Yeah, the term reframes our entire understanding of how we treat systemic problems. Cruel optimism is advice that sounds positive and empowering on the surface, but is fundamentally cruel because it places the burden of a massive systemic failure squarely onto individual shoulders.
The analogy from the source text here is incredibly clarifying.
The air pollution one.
Yes. So imagine you live in a city with severe choking air pollution. There are unregulated factories all around your neighborhood dumping toxic smog into the air 24 hours a day. People are developing chronic respiratory issues left and right.
Right.
And instead of the government stepping in to regulate the factories, society just turns to you and says, hey, you really need to take personal responsibility for your lung health. You should practice deeper breathing exercises. Buy this really expensive high-tech breathing mask. And if you still get asthma, well, it's because you didn't wear the mask tightly enough. You lack discipline.
It completely ignores the root cause of the crisis. It blames the victim for breathing the air they are literally forced to live in. Telling individuals to solve their attention crisis with sheer willpower while they live inside an environment engineered to distract them is the exact same mechanism. It is telling you to just breathe better while the tech factories pump cognitive smog directly into your frontal lobe.
And the hypocrisy reaches its absolute peak when you look at the actions of the tech giants themselves. You have massive corporations actively designing algorithms that fracture our neural pathways, and then simultaneously, those very same corporations offer their own employees on-site mindfulness retreats and meditation classes.
It's so ironic.
It's beyond ironic. They create a toxic environment and then sell you the antidote, basically packaging a societal collapse of focus as a failure of your personal morning routine.
It's an ingenious deflection of corporate responsibility, honestly. Because if your attention is fractured, it's not because you are under constant algorithmic bombardment. It's because, you didn't meditate for 10 minutes today.
But, okay, I have to challenge this cruel optimism idea, or at least the natural conclusion of it.
Sure.
If we tell people that their lack of focus is purely a systemic failure caused by Silicon Valley, aren't we completely stripping them of their agency?
That's a fair question.
Like, we're essentially telling the listener that they are helpless victims of a machine. If I can't control my attention because the algorithms are too strong, am I just a meat puppet for the tech billionaires?
Right.
That feels just as damaging as telling someone to try harder. So what does this all mean? Should you just give up on self-discipline entirely and doom scroll forever because the system is rigged?
That is the exact tension we need to navigate. It is not about rendering the individual helpless. It is about reallocating the shame.
Reallocating the shame.
Yeah. If you fail to focus, recognizing the systemic design removes the moral failing from your shoulders. However, treating technology as a monolith of pure, unadulterated evil oversimplifies the reality of human cognition.
Right.
If we treat technology as the sole villain, we miss the incredibly complex ways our brains actually adapt to these environments. And this is where the cognitive psychology research throws a massive wrench into Hari's narrative.
Well, let's get into the mechanics of that, because the research from Anafrieva and Gorbanova completely changes the perspective.
Yeah.
They studied the concept of SAT saturation in digital environments. We're talking about the micro elements of a digital interface.
Exactly. When we talk about visual saturation, we mean the subtle color shift when you hover your mouse over a button.
Yeah.
We mean the tiny haptic vibration when you refresh a page, or the specific way a hyperlink is underlined.
Little things you barely even notice.
Right. These are elements of interactive saturation. Now, it is undeniably true that digital environments overwhelm our attention compared to paper environments. A physical book is visually quiet.
Yeah.
It does not bombard your foveal vision with flashing sidebars or demand that you filter out irrelevant hyperlinks while you're trying to read a paragraph.
But Anafrieva and Gorbanova found something highly counterintuitive about this digital clutter.
They really did.
Because the assumption is that all this digital noise is purely distracting. But their experiments showed that these SAT elements, these saturated microfeedbacks, actually bypass our executive function to reduce cognitive friction.
That's the crucial mechanism right there. If you strip away these digital cues, like if you remove the hover effects, the color shifts, the bolding human attention performance in that digital space actually deteriorates further.
Wait, really? It gets worse?
It gets much worse. Without those microscaffolds, the cognitive load becomes way too high, and we get completely lost in the noise. So the technology isn't just stealing our attention, it is simultaneously attempting to patch the cognitive chaos it has created.
So it's like we are trapped in a labyrinth, and the algorithm is handing us a map.
Yes.
But Hari might argue that the map is just designed to keep us wandering in the maze a little longer, rather than actually showing us the exit.
That's a great way to put it. It's a deeply symbiotic feedback loop. The technology manages our cognitive load just enough to keep us engaged, but not so much that we crash and log off entirely.
Right.
It provides the visual breadcrumbs our brains desperately need to filter information in a hyper-stimulating environment. Next time you use a computer, notice how much of your navigation is guided by subtle color shifts you barely register.
Think of it like a casino's architecture. Casinos are notoriously overwhelming spaces, right? There are no clocks, no windows. The carpets have these dizzying, chaotic patterns designed to keep your eyes off the floor and up at the machines. It is highly saturated visual noise designed to disorient you from the outside world. But within that chaos, there are extremely clear, highly illuminated pathways that guide you effortlessly to the ATM or the high roller tables.
Exactly.
The digital interface is the same. It creates an overwhelming maze, but it hands your brain a highly optimized map to navigate it.
But wait, if we accept this, if we say that technology isn't just a malicious thief, but actually a necessary guide through a complex modern environment, aren't we giving human biology a free pass?
What do you mean?
Well, if the narrative is strictly technology is stealing our focus, What happens to the people whose attention deficits are strictly neurological?
Oh, wow. Yeah. This is where Hurry's systemic argument encounters its most serious and potentially dangerous limitation. And to explore this, we really have to look at the fierce medical critiques of his work.
It gets incredibly controversial here.
It does. And before we unpack this, we need to make something very clear to you, the listener. We are about to dive into the academic and medical controversy surrounding ADHD and psychiatric medications as presented in the source text.
Right.
As the hosts of this deep dive, we are not taking a stance on medical treatments. We are not endorsing either side of this highly sensitive debate. Our role is strictly to impartially report on the clash of viewpoints found in our source material to give you the most complete picture of this crisis.
That context is vital because the academic pushback, particularly from figures like Rosie Sexton, is severe.
Yeah, she did not hold back.
Not at all. Critics argue that Hari cherry-picks sociological data to craft a highly compelling cinematic narrative about an evil empire stealing our minds, while actively ignoring the complex biological realities of neurodivergence. Sexton goes incredibly hard on Hari's skepticism toward ADHD, attention deficit, hyperactivity disorder, and psychiatric medications.
Sexton's critique really hinges on the potential harm of a good story.
What do you mean by that?
Well, Harry's argument that our attention crisis is almost entirely an algorithmic conspiracy feels really good to read, right?
Oh, absolutely.
If you are a neurotypical person struggling to answer emails because you're addicted to social media, reading a book that tells you it's not your fault Mark Zuckerberg stole your brain is deeply absolving. It lets you off the hook.
It's very comforting. But Sexton points out that for a person with ADHD, their attention isn't just being stolen by a smartphone. Their brain chemistry fundamentally regulates dopamine and executive function differently. It is a documented neurobiological reality involving dopamine transporters and receptor density in the brain. When Hari frames the loss of focus purely as something that is done to us by tech companies, he risks completely invalidating the biological reality of neurodivergent individuals.
Because if the problem is entirely external, like if the root cause is just Silicon Valley smog, then the logical conclusion of that narrative is that internal biological medical treatments are unnecessary or even harmful.
Precisely. Sexton argues that this narrative, intentionally or not, acts as a regressive force.
Yeah.
It risks worsening the social stigma around mental illness by reverting to the idea that ADHD is just a behavioral issue caused by modern life, rather than a genuine neurological condition. It risks causing individuals to miss out on vital medical salvation because they've been convinced by a well-told story that their only problem is the attention economy. We cannot allow a critique of technology to erase human biology.
So we are left balancing on this edge, asking ourselves this massive philosophical question. Are we fighting an evil algorithmic empire that is strip mining our consciousness? Or are we simply a species struggling to biologically adapt to a civilization that is evolving faster than our limits?
The most scientifically honest answer is that we are probably experiencing both simultaneously.
Yeah.
We are biological creatures with hardwired limits, thrust into an environment of infinite digital saturation governed by profit-driven algorithms. But regardless of why our attention is fracturing, whether it is the external tech, the internal biology, or the collision of both, the consequences of this fracture are universal, and they are terrifying.
To truly understand what we stand to lose, we have to move beyond just talking about getting distracted at work. We need to look at Hari's framework of the 4 lights of attention.
This is such a brilliant concept.
It is a brilliant philosophical taxonomy. He doesn't treat attention as one monolithic concept. He breaks it down into 4 distinct tiers. And as we map these out, I want you listening to think about which of these lights you feel flickering in your own life right now. Let's start at the ground level, the first tier.
The first tier is the spotlight. This is your immediate, narrow focus. It is your ability to lock onto the current task at hand.
Right.
When you sit down to write a report, or you're chopping vegetables for dinner, or you're navigating a busy intersection in your car, the spotlight is what allows you to filter out background noise and execute a specific short-term action in the present moment.
And this is the light we're most aware of, right? When your phone buzzes and you look away from the spreadsheet, your spotlight just swung across the room.
Yeah, it's very visible.
It is highly reactive to immediate stimuli, which makes it the easiest target for an algorithm to hijack. But the real tragedy isn't just losing the spotlight. It's that the constant frantic hijacking of the spotlight prevents us from ever accessing the second tier.
Right, which is the starlight. Starlight is the focus that guides our long-term goals. If the spotlight is writing the email, the starlight is writing the novel.
Oh, I love that distinction.
It is your ability to hold a complex, multi-step goal in your mind over weeks, months, or years and navigate towards it even when the immediate path is obscured. You use stars to navigate over vast distances, right?
Exactly.
Starlight attention requires a massive amount of delayed gratification. It requires the executive function to ignore 1,000 immediate digital distractions because you have fixed your eyes on a distant point.
But if your spotlight is constantly being yanked around every 47 seconds, you literally never get the chance to look up at the stars.
Just putting out fires.
You're just stumbling around, looking at your feet, dealing with whatever's immediately flashing in front of you.
Which brings us to the third level, and this is where things get really existential. Daylight.
Daylight is where we move from mere productivity into the actual formation of identity.
Wow. Daylight is the deep, unstructured contemplation required to understand who we are. It is the attention you use when you are taking a long walk without headphones or just sitting on a train staring out the window.
Which nobody does anymore.
Nobody does it. But it is the cognitive space where your brain processes experiences, synthesizes memories, and asks the foundational questions. Am I happy in my career? Is this relationship fulfilling? What are my actual values?
Daylight requires boredom, and the shower is the perfect example of this. We constantly talk about having shower thoughts, these sudden moments of clarity or creative breakthroughs that happen while we're washing our hair.
Yeah, everyone relates to that.
The reason we have shower thoughts isn't because the water is magical.
Yeah.
It's because the shower is one of the only places left in modern life where we do not bring our phones.
Well, most of us anyway.
Right. It is a forced sensory isolation. It forces your brain to sit with its own internal monologue. Algorithms view boredom as a failure state. If you are bored, you might log off.
And they can't have that.
So they eradicate the boredom with endless novelty. And in doing so, they completely eradicate the daylight.
Yeah.
You never get the quiet time to actually figure out who you are. You just consume other people's curated identities.
But as profound a loss as daylight is, the fourth level shifts the stakes from the individual to the entire human race.
It really does.
The final tier is the stadium light.
The stadium light is our collective ability to see each other clearly. It is the sustained attention required to generate empathy, to understand complex social dynamics, and to function collectively as a society. Imagine a stadium flooded with light. You can see the entire crowd, the interplay of the teams, the sheer scale of the event.
Now extrapolate the failure of these lights. Let's walk through it.
Okay.
If we lose the spotlight, our personal productivity drops.
Well,
If we lose the starlight, we fail to achieve our dreams. If we lose the daylight, we lose our sense of self.
right.
But if the power grid fails on the stadium light, we lose the capacity to govern ourselves.
This connects directly to the political polarization and democratic instability we are seeing globally.
Absolutely.
Because a functioning democracy requires millions of people to sustain their attention on highly complex, nuanced, shared issues. Tax reform, foreign relations, supply chain logistics. These things require deep reading, active listening, and the cognitive endurance to hold conflicting ideas in your mind without defaulting to tribal rage.
But if everyone's attention span has been whittled down to 47 seconds by variable ratio schedules, you literally cannot explain healthcare reform.
No, it's impossible.
You cannot process a 40-page white paper on economic policy.
Yeah.
But you know it fits perfectly into a 47-second window.
An angry meme.
A scapegoat.
Exactly.
Hyper-simplified authoritarian slogans, us versus them narratives. The algorithms actively promote the outrage because anger holds the spotlight longer than nuance.
Anger is sticky.
It's incredibly sticky. When a society loses its stadium light, it becomes highly susceptible to demagogues who offer easy, emotionally charged answers to incredibly complex problems. If the population lacks the cognitive endurance to read policy, they will vote for whoever yells the loudest on a 15-second video clip.
If we lose daylight and stadium light, we are no longer a cohesive society. We become a scattered collection of isolated islands in the dark.
Yeah.
Each of us just glowing alone with the blue light of our own personal screens, totally disconnected from one another, incapable of seeing the person next to us, let alone engaging in the empathy required to understand their point of view.
Which proves that attention is not merely a private resource. It's not a life hack to help you clear your inbox faster.
Right.
Attention is the fundamental shared fuel of human civilization. Without it, humanity cannot unite to solve complex existential crises. Take climate change. It is a slow-moving, highly complex global disaster that requires unprecedented international cooperation and multi-generational thinking. It requires Starlight and Stadium Light working in perfect tandem. If we cannot sustain collective focus, we cannot survive it.
Facing the collapse of the stadium light
Yeah.
it feels paralyzing. When you zoom out to that macro level, the weaponized behavioral psychology, the algorithmic manipulation of our dopamine, the threat to democracy itself, it begs the question, how does an individual even begin to reclaim their explanatory power over their own life?
It's overwhelming.
How do we fight back when the opponent is both in our pocket and hardwired into our neuroscience?
This is where we must transition from diagnosing the crisis to exploring the rebellion. Hari provides a final, incredibly resonant metaphor in the text.
The river metaphor.
Yes, he says, imagine you are standing by a river and you see bodies constantly floating down the water, pulling those bodies out, trying to resuscitate them, burying them respectfully. That is important, noble, necessary work. But eventually, if the bodies keep coming, someone has to stop pulling them out. Someone has to start walking upstream to find out who is throwing them in.
The upstream rebellion. It isn't just about reclaiming your screen time statistics to hit a personal goal. It's not about winning a pathetic battle against a digital wellness app that you'll just override anyway, right?
Yes, we all bypass those limits.
We do. It is about reclaiming the fundamental right to interpret and author your own life. It is demanding that the environment we live in supports our cognition, rather than strip mining it for profit.
But walking upstream against trillion-dollar tech monopolies is daunting. So the source material offers a starting point, a micro-rebellion grounded in our neurobiology.
And it's so simple.
It starts with a tiny but radical action. Turn off all your screens 1 full hour before bed.
We all know that blue light suppresses melatonin. That's basic science at this point. The screen tricks your brain into thinking it's midday sun. But the real biological danger isn't just the light, it's the anticipatory loops.
Right.
When you are scrolling right before you close your eyes, you are keeping your brain in a state of hyperarousal. You are firing dopamine receptors, anticipating the next unpredictable reward from the algorithm. You are biologically hacking your brain to stay in a state of artificial vigilance.
By enforcing that 1 hour of complete digital silence before bed, you are allowing your neurochemistry to cool down. But beyond the biological repair, you achieve a massive psychological and economic victory.
An economic victory.
Yes. For that 1 hour, you cease to be cash flow for an algorithm.
Oh, wow.
You are starving the system of its most valuable resource, your cognitive engagement. You are taking your 2G signal off the grid so the 8K invasion has absolutely nothing to attack.
And this brings us to what we are calling the still bloom philosophy. This is the practical application I want you, the listener, to try tonight. When you put that phone away 1 hour before bed, the urge to look at it is going to hit you. It's going to feel like a physical itch in your brain. You will feel that phantom limb reflex twitching in your hand. When that urge hits, I want you to pause. Do not fight it with aggressive, clenched jaw willpower. Just linger in that urge.
Sit with the sheer physical discomfort of withdrawal. Sit with the feeling of being disconnected.
Stare into the darkness of your room. Feel the isolation. The algorithms have trained us to be terrified of isolation. They have conditioned us to view silence as a void that must immediately be filled with content.
Always more content.
But that isolation, that quiet discomfort, is the only place you can begin searching for your own daylight. The still bloom is the realization that in a world engineered by supercomputers to be deafeningly noisy, constantly stimulating, and forever demanding your immediate emotional reaction, the ultimate act of rebellion is carving out a quiet space to bloom in absolute silence.
It is the profound understanding that genuine human growth does not require constant input. In fact, deep cognitive and emotional growth requires the deliberate absence of input. It requires stillness.
To briefly synthesize the territory we've covered today, we started by acknowledging the sheer scale of the 8K algorithmic theft happening in our pockets, driven by the variable ratio schedules of the attention economy. We challenged the cruelty of cruel optimism that gaslights you into thinking this systemic crisis is your personal moral failing. We explored the nuanced SAT paradox, where tech acts as both the maze and the map, and we navigated the complex medical realities of neurodivergence that remind us we can never ignore human biology just for the sake of a clean narrative.
Exactly.
And we scaled all the way up to the existential realization that our very civilization relies on our ability to reclaim the stadium light of collective focus.
It is a massive systemic fight, but it begins with an individual refusal to be constantly harvested.
So we leave you with a final, lingering question to ponder on your own tonight. If attention is the shared fuel of civilization, and algorithms are constantly strip mining it for profit, what happens to our collective memory of who we really are? Tomorrow, when your hand unconsciously reaches for your pocket, ask yourself, are you turning on your own spotlight, or are you letting someone else turn off the stadium lights? Find your space to quietly bloom.